Eleanor let out a cruel laugh when Chloe, the driver, offered to help in the meeting. A driver talking business? The single mother took the document with trembling hands. What came from her lips froze Eleanor's laughter forever. Before we start today's story, tell me where you're watching from. Go ahead and grab a coffee, get comfortable on the couch, and please don't forget to support us. You just have to hit like, and I'll know you enjoy this kind of story. So ready? Let's begin. The rain beat relentlessly against the windows of the Marchetti Corporation skyscraper in New York City as Eleanor adjusted her designer blazer for the 10th time that morning. At 42, she'd built a business empire based on a simple philosophy: efficiency above all else. Feelings were a luxury she couldn't afford. "Chloe, I need to be at the office in 15 minutes, she said, sliding into the back seat of the black sedan without even glancing at the woman behind the wheel. Chloe nodded silently, adjusting the rear-view mirror. At 34, her eyes carried the weariness of someone who worked 16 hours a day as Eleanor's driver during the day and a cleaner in an office building at night. All to ensure that Michael, her 8-year-old son, had the opportunities she never did. The traffic was impossible. Eleanor drummed her fingers on the leather seat, her eyes glued to her phone where dozens of urgent emails flashed on the screen. Today was the most important day of the year for her company. The meeting with investors from Takeshi Corporation, from Japan, which could secure a $1.2 billion contract. "I can't be late today, Chloe. This contract will change the future of the company," Eleanor murmured, more to herself than to her driver. Chloe glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the tension etched on her boss's face. "I'm sorry, Ms. Marchetti. The traffic is terrible today because of the rain, but I'll find a faster route." Eleanor didn't even reply. To her, Chloe was just another invisible employee, someone who was part of the scenery, but never truly existed in her world. She didn't know that the woman at the wheel spoke fluent Portuguese, English, Spanish, Japanese, Mandarin, Italian, French, German, and Russian, languages she had learned from her immigrant parents and perfected through years of night study. When they finally arrived at the building, Eleanor got out of the car without a thank you and marched determinedly toward the elevator. Chloe remained in the parking garage, as she always did, waiting for the return trip at the end of the day. On the 45th floor, the conference room was already prepared. Eleanor obsessively checked every detail: the arrangement of the chairs, the perfectly aligned documents, the room temperature. At 2:00 p.m. sharp, the Japanese delegation arrived. Takeshi Yamamoto, an elegant man of about 60, entered accompanied by his team. Eleanor smiled her most professional smile and introduced herself in English. The official translator Jennifer, a 40-year-old blonde woman hired specifically for the occasion, positioned herself strategically between the two parties. "It's an honor to welcome you to our company," Eleanor said confidently. "We are very excited about this partnership." Jennifer quickly translated into Japanese, and Yamamoto nodded politely. The first few minutes went by normally, with formal introductions and standard pleasantries. Eleanor felt completely in control of the situation. She had rehearsed every word, every gesture, every argument. This contract wasn't just about money. It was about proving that a woman could run a multinational corporation better than any man. "I'd like to show you our growth numbers for the last 5 years, she said, starting the presentation on the large screen. But it was at that moment that the first cracks began to appear. Yamamoto frowned slightly as Jennifer translated, and he whispered something to his assistant. Eleanor noticed the expression, but remained confident. What she didn't realize was that Jennifer was making small translation errors. Nothing glaring, but important cultural nuances were being missed. Concepts about corporate honor, long-term commitment, and business philosophy were being misinterpreted. Outside, Chloe remained in the parking garage, reading a Japanese book she had borrowed from the library. It was a Haruki Murakami novel in its original language. For her, books were windows to worlds. Her financial reality didn't allow her to explore physically. Every so often, she would look up, seeing the lights of the 45th floor, where she knew her boss was fighting for the company's future, never imagining that in a few hours, her own destiny would be completely intertwined with that meeting. The tension in the conference room was becoming palpable. Eleanor noticed that Yamamoto was growing more reserved, responding with monosyllables and avoiding direct eye contact. Something was wrong, but she couldn't pinpoint what it was. "Perhaps we can discuss the investment terms," Eleanor suggested, trying to regain control of the conversation. Jennifer translated, but this time Yamamoto seemed genuinely confused. He turned to his assistant and spoke rapidly in Japanese. Eleanor caught the urgency in his tone, even without understanding the words. "Is there a problem?" Eleanor asked, forcing a smile. "Mr. Yamamoto would like to clarify some points about your company's business philosophy," Jennifer translated, but her voice was starting to show insecurity. Eleanor launched into a detailed explanation of the company's mission, sustainable growth, and social responsibility. They were words that sounded good in annual reports, but that she rarely applied in her actual day-to-day practice. As she spoke, she didn't notice how Yamamoto was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. In Japanese culture, there were specific nuances about how to discuss business, about mutual respect, and about the importance of considering all employees as an integral part of corporate success. Jennifer was clearly out of her depth. Her academic background in Japanese was solid, but she lacked the deep cultural experience necessary to navigate the subtleties of a business negotiation of this magnitude. "Efficiency is our top priority," Eleanor said with conviction. "Every employee must deliver measurable results or be replaced." When Jennifer translated this, Yamamoto sat up straighter. His brow furrowed almost imperceptibly, but Eleanor was too busy consulting her charts to notice. Down below, Chloe had finished her chapter and was watching people enter and leave the building. She recognized some faces. Executives she occasionally drove. Secretaries she greeted in the hallways. Security guards with whom she exchanged polite smiles. To her, every person had a story. She didn't see job titles or hierarchies. She saw human beings with dreams, fears, and responsibilities. It was a perspective Eleanor had lost long ago on her climb to the top. Back in the conference room, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Yamamoto was asking direct questions about how the company treated its operational-level employees, about internal development programs, and about Eleanor's leadership philosophy. "Our operational staff do what they're paid to do," Eleanor replied, not realizing how cold her words sounded. "We invest in talent that shows potential for growth." Jennifer tried to soften the translation, but the message came through clearly to Yamamoto. He began to shake his head negatively, clearly disturbed. "Mr. Yamamoto would like to know about specific examples of how the company values all its employees," Jennifer translated, now visibly nervous. Eleanor felt the first knot in her stomach. "Well, we have productivity incentive programs and—" she stammered, realizing she was losing control of the conversation. It was then that Yamamoto stood up and spoke directly to his assistant in Japanese. Jennifer fell silent, clearly unable to keep up with the speed and complexity of the conversation. "What is he saying?" Eleanor asked, her voice betraying the first hint of panic. Jennifer looked from side to side, sweating. He's speaking very fast and using technical terms that—" Eleanor felt the ground give way beneath her. $2 billion was slipping through her fingers, and she didn't even understand why. Yamamoto turned to Eleanor and spoke in slow English. "I'm sorry, but there seem to be fundamental misunderstandings about corporate values. Perhaps it would be best to reconsider this partnership." The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor looked at Jennifer, who was clearly panicking, then at Yamamoto, who was gathering his papers with formal Japanese politeness, but with the clear intention of leaving. She needed a miracle, and she needed it now. Desperation washed over Eleanor. 2 years of preparation, countless hours of work. The future of the company. It was all collapsing before her eyes. Yamamoto continued to organize his documents with precise, final movements. "Please, Mr. Yamamoto," Eleanor said, standing up abruptly. "If there's a misunderstanding, we can clarify it. This partnership is important for both sides." Yamamoto paused and looked at her with an expression that mixed politeness with disappointment. "Ms. Marchetti, the problem isn't technical, it's philosophical. Our companies operate on fundamentally different values." Jennifer tried to translate into Japanese, but her voice was trembling. Eleanor could tell the translator was lost, unable to capture the cultural nuances that were destroying the negotiation. "What values?" Eleanor asked, genuinely confused. "We are a solid, profitable, efficient company." "Efficiency without humanity is not sustainable in the long run," Yamamoto replied in his careful English. "At Takeshi Corporation, we believe a company's value lies in how it treats every person, from the CEO to the most junior employee." Eleanor felt a strange pang in her chest. Yamamoto's words echoed uncomfortably in her mind, making her think of Chloe waiting in the parking garage, of all the employees she had coldly fired, of all the people she had treated as numbers on a spreadsheet. "We value our employees," she said, but the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. Yamamoto nodded politely, but his eyes showed skepticism. He turned to his assistant and spoke quickly in Japanese. This time, his words were longer, more complex, filled with cultural references that Jennifer simply couldn't follow. "What is he saying?" Eleanor asked, her voice now clearly desperate. Jennifer swallowed hard. He's talking about Japanese cultural concepts that I can't translate properly." It was at that moment that Eleanor made a decision that would change everything. In a fit of total desperation, she ran to the window overlooking the parking garage and looked down. Chloe was there, as always, loyal and patient. "Chloe," she muttered to herself, and then a crazy idea flashed through her mind. Without a second thought, Eleanor bolted from the conference room, leaving everyone stunned. Yamamoto stopped talking and looked at his assistants with a questioning expression. Jennifer froze, not knowing whether to explain or wait. Eleanor ran through the hallways, frantically pressed the elevator button, and descended 45 floors in record time. Her hands were shaking as she crossed the lobby toward the parking garage. "Chloe!" she yelled, running toward the car. Chloe looked up from her book, startled. Seeing Eleanor running toward her, face flushed and out of breath, was completely out of character. "Ms. Marchetti, is something wrong?" Chloe asked, quickly getting out of the car. "Chloe, this is going to sound crazy, but..." Eleanor paused to catch her breath, her hands still trembling. "Do you understand any Japanese?" Chloe blinked, confused. "Japanese? Yes, anything, a few words, basic phrases, anything." Eleanor was clearly desperate. Chloe hesitated for a moment, looking at the boss who had always treated her as if she were invisible. Yes, I speak Japanese." "You speak Japanese?" Eleanor almost shouted in surprise. "Yes, ma'am, fluently." Chloe lowered her eyes, as if admitting it was something to be embarrassed about. Eleanor was silent for a few seconds, processing the information. Then, without any further explanation, she grabbed Chloe by the arm. "You need to come upstairs with me, now, please." Chloe looked at Eleanor with a mix of confusion and concern, but there was something in her boss's urgency that made her nod. They ran together toward the elevator, leaving the Murakami book open on the car seat. The elevator ascended slowly, and with each floor, Eleanor felt her heart pound harder. Chloe stood beside her, clearly nervous, smoothing down her simple clothes and wondering what on earth was happening. "Ms. Marchetti, May I ask why you need someone who speaks Japanese? Chloe tried to break the tense silence. Eleanor looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time, not as an employee, but as a person. There's a very important meeting upstairs with Japanese investors. The translator is having difficulties. And you thought I could... Chloe trailed off, realization dawning in her eyes. You want me to translate? I know it sounds absurd. You're my driver, not a professional translator, but I'm desperate here. Eleanor ran her hands through her perfectly styled hair, messing it up for the first time in years. Chloe was silent for a moment. Ms. Marchetti, with all due respect, you've never shown any interest in anything about me. How did you know I speak Japanese? The question hit Eleanor like a punch to the gut. Chloe was right. In 3 years of service, Eleanor had never asked a single personal question about her driver. I didn't know, Eleanor admitted, her voice dropping. It was a desperate guess. But now that I know, you really speak Japanese. My father is of Japanese descent, my mother, Italian. I grew up speaking both languages at home, along with Portuguese, English, Spanish. Chloe stopped, realizing she was saying too much. Eleanor stared at her, wide-eyed. How many languages do you speak? 9, Chloe replied simply, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. The elevator reached the 45th floor with a soft ding. The doors opened, but Eleanor remained frozen, processing what she had just discovered. 9 languages, she repeated, incredulous, and I never asked. In 3 years. Chloe shrugged. People see what they want to see. To most, I'm just the driver. Those words pierced Eleanor's chest. They stepped out of the elevator and walked down the hall toward the conference room. Eleanor could hear voices from inside. Yamamoto was clearly preparing to leave. Chloe, before we go in... Eleanor stopped and turned to her. I need you to know that I should have gotten to know you better. I should have asked about you. Chloe looked into Eleanor's eyes and saw something she had never seen before, genuine vulnerability. Don't worry about that now, Ms. Marchetti. Let's see if I can help with your meeting. They entered the room together. Yamamoto was on his feet, placing his documents into his leather briefcase. Jennifer was sitting, her face red with embarrassment. Everyone looked up in surprise as Eleanor returned with her driver. Mr. Yamamoto, Eleanor said, trying to regain her professional composure. I'd like to introduce Chloe, our specialized linguistic consultant. Chloe felt her face flush. Linguistic consultant. Eleanor was improvising, and she would have to play along. Yamamoto looked at Chloe with polite curiosity. It was obvious from her simple attire that she wasn't an executive, but there was something in her eyes, a sharp intelligence he recognized immediately. Konnichiwa, Yamamoto-san, Chloe said, bowing slightly in the traditional Japanese greeting. Hajimemashite. Watakushi wa Chloe desu. The effect was immediate. Yamamoto straightened up, surprised, and replied automatically, Konnichiwa, Chloe-san. Nihongo ga ojuzu desu ne. Chloe smiled genuinely. Arigatou gozaimasu. Chichi wa Nihonjin no shison desu. Eleanor watched the exchange without understanding a word, but she could see from the body language that something had shifted. Yamamoto seemed interested, even impressed. Pardon me, Yamamoto said, turning to Eleanor. Your consultant tells me her father is of Japanese descent. Her Japanese is excellent. Eleanor looked at Chloe with a mixture of admiration and shock. The woman she had ignored for 3 years was saving the most important meeting of her career. Chloe, Eleanor said quietly, can you help us understand where the communication went wrong? Chloe nodded and respectfully addressed Yamamoto. Yamamoto-san, I would like to understand what your specific concerns were during the meeting. With your permission, I'd like to hear your impressions directly from you. Yamamoto looked at her with renewed interest. There was something in the way Chloe addressed him, a genuine respect for Japanese culture that had been lacking in the previous interactions. Chloe-san, Yamamoto began in Japanese. Honestly, I was concerned about the business philosophy that was presented. It seemed to me that there is a disconnect between what is said about valuing employees and how it is actually practiced. Chloe listened intently, nodding at specific points. Eleanor watched, fascinated, as her driver interacted naturally with one of the most powerful businessmen in Japan. I understand your concern perfectly, Yamamoto-san, Chloe replied in Japanese. In Japanese culture, the concept of omotenashi, the genuine care for all people, is fundamental to sustainable business, isn't it? Exactly. Yamamoto grew animated, clearly impressed by Chloe's cultural understanding. Without omotenashi, a company might see short-term profits, but it won't build lasting relationships. Eleanor was lost in the conversation, but she could feel the energy in the room change. Jennifer, who had remained silent, watched with a mix of relief and professional embarrassment. May I translate for Ms. Marchetti? Chloe asked Yamamoto politely. He nodded, curious to see how Chloe would navigate between the two cultures. Chloe turned to Eleanor, choosing her words carefully. Ms. Marchetti, Mr. Yamamoto is concerned because he feels there's a disconnect between how we say we treat our employees and how we actually treat them in practice. Eleanor frowned. But we pay competitive salaries, offer benefits. May I continue the translation? Chloe interrupted gently. Eleanor nodded, though visibly uncomfortable. Chloe addressed Yamamoto again in Japanese. Yamamoto-san, Ms. Marchetti would like to better understand your expectations. She mentioned salaries and benefits. Could you explain what else would be important for a successful partnership? Yamamoto thought for a moment, then replied, Chloe-san, in our culture, we believe a company is like an extended family. Every member, regardless of their position, should feel valued and heard. Not just through money, but through genuine respect and opportunities for growth. Chloe nodded and turned to Eleanor. He's talking about the Japanese concept of a company as a family. For them, valuing employees means more than pay. It means genuine respect, development opportunities, and making every person feel important, regardless of their job title. Eleanor felt something stir in her chest. She looked at Chloe. How many times had she shown genuine respect for her driver? How many growth opportunities had she offered? Ask him, Eleanor said slowly, what he would specifically expect to see in our company. Chloe translated, and Yamamoto responded at length in Japanese, gesturing expressively. He says he would like to see concrete examples of how the company treats employees at all levels. He wants to know if there are internal development programs, if people are promoted from within, if there's a real channel for employees to share ideas. Chloe paused, hesitating. Go on, Eleanor encouraged. He also wants to know if the leadership personally knows their employees, if they know their names, their stories, their dreams. Chloe lowered her eyes as she said this. Eleanor felt as if she had been slapped. Here was Yamamoto, asking about knowing employees personally, while she had discovered just 20 minutes ago that her own driver spoke 9 languages. The silence that followed was heavy. Eleanor looked at Chloe, then at Yamamoto, then back at Chloe. Chloe, she said finally, her voice softer, ask him if he would like to hear the story of a specific employee from our company. Chloe looked at Eleanor in surprise but translated the question to Yamamoto. The Japanese businessman tilted his head, intrigued, and replied that yes, he would like to hear. Eleanor took a deep breath. For the first time in her career, she was about to expose herself completely, to admit her failings in front of a potential billion-dollar partner. Chloe, Eleanor said, turning to face her directly, tell Mr. Yamamoto about yourself, about your story, your studies, your languages, about how a single mother works 2 jobs and still finds time to read Japanese literature in its original language. Chloe froze. Ms. Marchetti, I don't think... Please, Eleanor interrupted, her voice thick with emotion. Tell him, and be honest about how I've treated you these past 3 years. The request was so unusual, so vulnerable that Chloe couldn't refuse. She turned to Yamamoto and began to speak in Japanese, her voice hesitant at first, but gaining confidence as she continued. She told him about growing up in an immigrant family, about learning languages by listening to her parents talk with neighbors of different nationalities. She spoke of studying at night while working during the day, about her passion for literature and different cultures. Yamamoto listened with growing attention, asking occasional questions that showed his genuine interest. Chloe told him about Michael, about her dreams of one day being able to afford college for him, about how she read books in different languages to keep her mind sharp. Then, with an honesty that cut Eleanor to the heart, Chloe spoke about how invisible she felt at work, how she had tried in the first few months to engage in conversations about books or cultures when she saw Eleanor reading reports in Spanish or Italian, but how she had learned to remain silent. Yamamoto-san, Chloe said, her voice growing quieter, I must be honest. Ms. Marchetti never asked about my education or my skills. To her, I was just the driver. Today is the first time in 3 years that she is truly seeing me as a person. Eleanor felt tears welling up in her eyes. Hearing her own failure described so clearly, so without malice, was devastating. Yamamoto listened to it all in silence, then turned to Eleanor with a thoughtful expression. Chloe-san has just demonstrated exactly what I was trying to explain, he said in English. A company can have the most talented person in the world working for it, but if the leadership can't see that talent, both lose. Eleanor nodded, unable to hold back her tears any longer. You're right. I was so focused on numbers, on efficiency, that I forgot to see the people. But, Yamamoto continued, the fact that you brought Chloe here today, that you're willing to admit this publicly, shows a capacity for change. That is rare in a leader. Chloe translated Yamamoto's words, and Eleanor turned to her. Chloe, I owe you an apology, not just for today, but for 3 years of treating you like you were invisible. You are clearly more qualified for many positions in our company than the people I've hired. Ms. Marchetti, Chloe replied gently, you don't have to apologize. Just, maybe we can do things differently from now on. Yamamoto watched this exchange with interest. May I ask a question, Ms. Marchetti? If this partnership moves forward, what would change in your company, not just in policies on paper, but in actual practice? Eleanor looked at Chloe, then at Yamamoto. Honestly, everything, starting with promoting Chloe to a position where her talents are actually used, and implementing programs to identify and develop hidden talents at all levels of the company. And how will we ensure this isn't just a promise made during a negotiation? Yamamoto asked directly. Eleanor thought for a moment. Then an idea began to form in her mind. What if Chloe were our new director of multicultural relations, responsible for identifying and developing talent throughout the company and for ensuring our corporate culture reflects the values we're discussing today? Chloe looked at Eleanor in complete shock. Ms. Marchetti, I don't know what to say. The silence in the room was palpable. Chloe was clearly in shock. Yamamoto watched with interest, and Eleanor was making the riskiest decision of her career, promoting her driver to an executive position in front of the most important investor she had ever met. Chloe, Eleanor said, turning completely towards her, you speak 9 languages. Understand cultural nuances better than any consulting firm I've ever hired, and clearly possess the emotional intelligence that my leadership has lacked. Why should this be a surprise? Chloe looked from Eleanor to Yamamoto, trying to process what was happening. Ms. Marchetti, I don't have any executive experience. I don't have an MBA. I don't have... You have something more important, Eleanor interrupted. You have wisdom and humility and the ability to truly see people. Yamamoto leaned forward, clearly intrigued by the unfolding situation. May I ask Chloe-san a question? Eleanor nodded, and Chloe straightened up, still visibly nervous. Chloe-san, Yamamoto said in Japanese, if you were responsible for creating a corporate culture that values all employees, what would be your first action? Chloe thought for a moment before answering, also in Japanese. Yamamoto-san, I would start by listening. I would visit every department, every level of the company, and I would ask each person, what is your dream? What do you need to grow here? How can we support not just your work, but you as a person? Yamamoto smiled, the first genuine smile he had shown during the entire meeting, and after that, I would create programs where people like me, who have hidden talents, could be discovered and developed, not just technical courses, but real opportunities for growth, and I would ensure that leadership personally knows every employee. Eleanor, who didn't understand the Japanese conversation, asked, What are you discussing? Chloe turned to her, translating. He asked how I would approach creating a more human corporate culture. I said I would start by listening to every employee, understanding their dreams and needs. And would that include, Eleanor asked slowly, teaching me how to be a better leader? The question caught Chloe by surprise. Ms. Marchetti, Chloe, you just demonstrated in 1 hour what I have failed to do in 10 years of my career. You navigated between cultures, resolved an impasse that was destroying this negotiation, and you did it with a grace and humility I've never had. Eleanor paused, her voice becoming emotional. I need someone like you helping me be better. Yamamoto watched this exchange with growing admiration. Forgive me for interrupting, he said, but I would like to make a proposal. Both Eleanor and Chloe turned to him. If you are both committed to this change, Chloe-san accepting this position and Ms. Marchetti committing to this cultural transformation, I would like to propose that our partnership begin with a pilot project. What kind of project? Asked Eleanor. 6 months, said Yamamoto. Implement these changes, show me how this new philosophy works in practice, and then we will discuss the full investment. But, he raised a finger, I want monthly reports directly from Chloe-san on the progress. Eleanor looked at Chloe. Would you accept not just the promotion, but this responsibility as well? Chloe took a deep breath. She thought of Michael, of all the years working 2 jobs, of all the dreams she had kept tucked away. But more than that, she thought of the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of other employees who, like her, might be invisible. Yes, she said finally. I accept. Yamamoto smiled again and stood up, extending his hand to Chloe. Then, Chloe-san, it will be an honor to work with you. 6 months later, Eleanor was at her desk, but the desk was no longer on the 45th floor. She had moved down to the 20th, choosing a smaller office with glass walls where any employee could see her and approach her directly. Chloe walked into her office, now adjacent to Eleanor's, carrying a stack of reports and a smile that had become her trademark at the company. How did the interviews go today? Eleanor asked, looking up from her computer. Unbelievable, Chloe replied, sitting in the chair across from the desk. We discovered a custodian on the 3rd floor who is a certified engineer from Syria, a security guard who speaks fluent Mandarin and has an MBA, and one of the women from the cleaning crew has a degree in French literature. Eleanor shook her head, still amazed by the discoveries they made weekly. And are they all willing to join the development program? Not just willing, they're thrilled. Eleanor, Chloe paused, still getting used to calling her former boss by her first name. You should have seen their eyes when they were told their skills were valued. Over the past 6 months, the transformation at Marchetti Corporation had been radical. Chloe had implemented her talent discovery program, where every employee was offered a 1-hour, one-on-one conversation to discuss their skills, experiences, and aspirations. The results were extraordinary. Dozens of underutilized employees were promoted or transferred to positions that better leveraged their talents. Productivity had increased by 30%, but more importantly, employee satisfaction was at an all-time high. "Mr. Yamamoto called today," Eleanor said. "He wants to schedule a visit next week to see the progress in person." Chloe nodded. "We're ready. The numbers speak for themselves, but more importantly, the energy in the company is completely different." It was true. Walking through the hallways now, you could feel a different vibe. Employees greeted each other, there was more collaboration between departments, and people seemed genuinely happy to be there. "Chloe," Eleanor said, leaning back in her chair, "I need to ask you something. Do you regret accepting this position?" Chloe smiled. "Why do you ask?" "Because I know it was a huge risk. You left the security of a job you knew well to dive into something completely new." "Eleanor," Chloe answered, "for the first time in my professional life, I wake up excited to go to work. Not just because the salary allows me to give Michael a better life, but because I feel like I'm making a difference in other people's lives." Eleanor nodded. Remembering the conversation she'd had with Michael the month before, Chloe had organized a family day at the company where employees could bring their children to see their workplace. Michael, now 9, had charmed everyone with his intelligence and politeness. "Speaking of Michael," Eleanor said, "how is he adjusting to the new school?" Chloe's face lit up. "He loves it. The private language tutoring you suggested is helping a lot. He said he wants to be an international diplomat when he grows up." Eleanor smiled. Offering Michael a full scholarship to the best private school in the city had been one of her first decisions under the new company philosophy, investing not just in employees, but in their families. "And you? How are your night classes for business administration going?" Chloe blushed slightly. "It's tough to balance with work, but it's invigorating. I'm learning how to formalize a lot of the things I've always done intuitively." Eleanor had insisted that Chloe pursue an executive MBA with all costs covered by the company. "Talent without the formal credentials still faces resistance," she had argued. "Let's make sure you have both." Just then, Eleanor's assistant knocked on the door. "Ms. Marchetti, the front desk said some flowers have arrived for Ms. Chloe." Chloe frowned. "Flowers? For me?" Minutes later, she returned carrying a beautiful arrangement of Japanese flowers with a card. She read it silently, then looked up at Eleanor with a surprised expression. "It's from Mr. Yamamoto," she said. "He says he's impressed with the monthly reports and that our human-centric business philosophy is inspiring changes within Takeshi Corporation itself." Eleanor felt a wave of pride, not just for the financial results, but for the personal transformation they had both experienced. "Chloe," she said, "do you have any ideas on how we can continue to expand this model?" Chloe smiled, picking up a folder from her desk. "Funny you should ask. I have a few proposals." On the morning of Yamamoto's visit, Eleanor and Chloe arrived at the office early. The company was prepared to showcase not just impressive numbers, but a genuine cultural transformation. Yamamoto arrived promptly at 9:00 a.m., accompanied by 2 assistants, but this time, instead of going directly up to a conference room, he had requested a full tour of the facilities. "Yamamoto-san," Chloe greeted in Japanese, bowing respectfully, "it is an honor to have you back." "Chloe-san," he replied, smiling, "I am eager to see these transformations up close." They started on the ground floor, where Chloe introduced Carlos, the former security guard, who now worked as an international relations assistant. Carlos greeted Yamamoto in fluent Mandarin, explaining the company's new multicultural security program. "He was a security guard 6 months ago," Eleanor explained to Yamamoto. "Chloe discovered he had an MBA and spoke 3 languages. Yamamoto nodded, impressed. "And how is the adjustment?" Better than I ever imagined," Carlos replied in English. "It's incredible how working on something you love changes your entire outlook on life." Moving up to the 3rd floor, they met Amira, the former Syrian custodian who now worked in the engineering department. She was explaining a systems optimization project to a group of colleagues using her engineering knowledge. "Amira," Chloe said, "could you tell Mr. Yamamoto about your experience?" Amira addressed Yamamoto shyly, but with growing confidence. "Mr. Yamamoto, I cleaned these offices for 2 years. I had an engineering degree from Syria, but no one recognized it here. Now, not only am I working on technical projects, but the company is helping me get my degree validated in the United States." "And how do you feel about that?" Yamamoto asked. "Like I can finally breathe," Amira replied, her eyes shining, "like my story matters." As they continued the tour, a similar pattern repeated itself. On the 5th floor, they met Lucia, a former secretary, who now coordinated the new Cultural Diversity Department. On the 10th floor, Pedro, a former office assistant who had become a marketing assistant after his graphic design talents were discovered. But it was on the 15th floor that Yamamoto stopped, surprised. "Is this a daycare center?" "Yes," Eleanor said with pride. "We found that many employees, especially single mothers like Chloe were spending a large part of their salary on childcare. We decided to open a daycare center in the company," Chloe added. "And it's not just babysitting. We have multilingual educational programs. The children learn English, Spanish, and basic Japanese." Yamamoto watched children playing and learning in a colorful, welcoming environment. Michael was there, helping younger kids with their homework. "Michael Kun," Yamamoto said, greeting the boy in Japanese. "Konnichiwa, Yamamoto-san," Michael replied, bowing politely. "My mom taught me about the importance of respect in Japanese culture." "And what do you want to be when you grow up?" Yamamoto asked, continuing in Japanese. "I want to work with people from different countries, helping them understand each other better," Michael answered fluently. Yamamoto smiled, clearly touched. He turned to Chloe and Eleanor. "You are not just transforming a company, you are shaping the next generation." Finally, they reached the 20th floor, where Eleanor had set up a collaborative workspace. Instead of closed offices, there were open areas where employees from different departments could interact. "And now," Eleanor said, "I'd like to show you our financial results." Yamamoto examined the reports in detail. Productivity had increased by 35%, employee turnover had dropped to nearly 0, and the company had expanded into 3 new international markets by leveraging the language skills of previously underutilized employees. "But the most important thing," Chloe added, "is this." She showed him hundreds of letters from employees, describing how their lives had changed. Yamamoto read a few in silence, then looked up at them. "You have achieved something rare in the corporate world. You have proven that doing the right thing is also the most profitable thing." "So," Eleanor asked, trying to contain her anxiety, "what do you think about formalizing our partnership?" Yamamoto smiled. "I didn't come here just to evaluate. I came to propose something bigger." "Something bigger?" Eleanor asked, her heart racing. Yamamoto settled into a chair in the conference room, the same room where, 6 months earlier, the partnership had nearly collapsed. But now the atmosphere was completely different. The walls were decorated with photos of employees and their families. There were plants brought in by the staff themselves, and the long table had been replaced with a round one, symbolizing equality and collaboration. "Takeshi Corporation doesn't just want to invest in you," Yamamoto said. We want to create a global model based on what you have developed here." Chloe translated simultaneously for a few employees who weren't fluent in English. They had been invited to join the meeting, something unthinkable in the company's old culture. "A global model," Eleanor repeated. "Yes, we want to implement the Marchetti-Chloe philosophy in all of our subsidiaries around the world," Yamamoto explained. "And we want you to lead this implementation." Eleanor and Chloe looked at each other, stunned. "This would mean," Yamamoto continued, "that Chloe-san would travel to our companies in Japan, the United States, Brazil, and Europe, teaching other leaders how to identify and develop hidden talent." Chloe felt a wave of emotion. "Yamamoto-san, that is more than I have ever dreamed." "And Eleanor-san," Yamamoto said, turning to her, "you would become our global chief cultural officer, responsible for ensuring this model is implemented with authenticity across all cultures." Eleanor was silent for a few seconds, absorbing the magnitude of the proposal. "What about Michael?" Chloe asked, concerned about the travel this would entail. "Ah," Yamamoto smiled. "We thought of that as well. We offer full scholarships for international education programs. Michael could study in any country where you were working, receiving a truly global education." At that moment, Michael walked into the room, still in his uniform from the company daycare. "Mum, can I talk to Mr. Yamamoto?" Chloe nodded, curious. Michael approached Yamamoto and said in Japanese, "Yamamoto-san, thank you for seeing that my mom is special. She was always the smartest person I knew, but now everyone else can see it too." Yamamoto was visibly moved. He replied in Japanese, "Michael-kun, your mother has taught us all a valuable lesson. Sometimes the most extraordinary people are right in front of us, just waiting to be seen." Eleanor, who had been watching the interaction, felt tears in her eyes. "Chloe," she said, "remember the first time we rode that elevator up together? I was desperate, you were nervous, and neither of us imagined it would change our lives forever." "I remember," Chloe replied, smiling. "You asked me if I spoke Japanese, and I thought you'd lost your mind." "And now," Eleanor said, looking around the room filled with happy, engaged employees, "you're about to teach the world about human dignity in business." Yamamoto stood up, holding out documents. "If you accept, we would like to begin immediately. The initial investment will be $1, $2 billion, but with the potential for much more as the model expands." Eleanor looked at Chloe. "What do you think, partner?" Chloe smiled, remembering how she used to be just the driver. "I think it's time to show the world that every human being has value, regardless of their job title." They signed the papers together. Yamamoto clapped, and all the employees present broke into applause. 2 years later, the Marchetti-Chloe philosophy had been implemented in 47 companies around the world. Thousands of underutilized employees had been discovered and promoted. The story of Chloe and Eleanor had become a case study in business schools. But for Chloe, the most special moment was still when Michael would call from his new international school in Tokyo, talking excitedly about his classmates from 15 different countries. "Mom," he said in one of those calls, "I understand now why you always said every person has a special story. You taught me to see it, and now I'm teaching my friends too." Chloe smiled, looking out the window of her office, now on the 45th floor, but with its doors always open. Sometimes the greatest miracles happen when we finally stop to see the extraordinary people who have been right in front of us all along. If you enjoyed this story of transformation and the discovery of hidden talents, leave a like and share in the comments. What special talent do you have that maybe the world doesn't know about yet? Your words might inspire others to recognize their own worth.